Please welcome to the stage, Scott Fendorf.
Hi, everybody. It's good afternoon. Got to take in this view here just for a moment. All right, well, I'm not going to surprise you. I'm going to be talking about wildfires, and Michael and Anne in particular just teed me up really well, so I want to thank them for really setting the stage on this. Anne in particular did a really great description of the LA wildfires and the devastation that hit, and that's probably something that's really apparent to us. If we look right now at Georgia, we're seeing the same thing happen. What we're going to also find is that we're going to see these more and more commonly, and they're also going to be more and more destructive. What we might miss in this is that despite the focus on the destructive power we see directly from the fire, a really big factor that we all have to be thinking about is the smoke. And so it used to be more of a problem for the Western US, but over the last 2 years, everybody in the US has awoken to wildfire smoke. So this last summer, you had the Canadian wildfires bringing smoke down into the upper Midwest and across. The year before, we had the Canadian wildfires bringing to the eastern seaboard. And what we might not recognize is that as bad and devastating as the actual fire itself is, there's this insidious problem that we get from the smoke. And it's going to be a bigger problem in our future. And so we're going to have to start thinking creatively about how we study smoke. We're going to need new approaches for how we collect air samples, for how we sample this material, get new sensing technology, and it's going to take us into a new future that's going to allow us to really understand the smoke in ways that we don't really understand right now. And why we need to do this is that smoke, to some degree, is inconvenience. We all recognize that. We're going to choke on it for a few days. But what we probably miss is that it's actually really deadly. And if we look at the population health studies that have been coming out, what we see is that smoke actually, or wildfire smoke, has really a large attribution to deaths. The worst part is that as we see a change in climate, the three bars on the right here are all future worlds, we see that the mortality rates go up, attributed to smoke. So the other aspect about it that we find out is that wildfire smoke is far more toxic than other forms of air quality or degradation of air quality that we see. The question might be is, why is that? And so what we have to do is look underneath this and find out what are the toxins that are in the wildfires. So largely what we're predicated on right now is particulate matter and really fine particles. So if you look at the particles that we think of as being most toxic, they're really fine, things that we call PM2.5. That's a particle of 2.5 microns. It's about 1/20th of the size of a hair, the diameter of a human hair. We use that to develop a metric that we call the air quality index. So probably on every one of your phones right now, in your weather app or in some other app, you have a measure of your air quality index. And it gives you a pretty good measure of what the particulate matter is out in the air right now. Great, sounds good. Well, let's do just a quick exercise. I want to show you 3 different fires. And in those fires, I want to ask you a question. Is the health assessment using the AQI sufficient? Right? So let's do 3 different fires that all occurred within California in recent years. So one of them is the LA wildfire, or one of the LA wildfires, the Eaton fire. That's the one on your right, on your left, right? After you get the directionality right. In the middle is a creek fire.
Far right.
You're right. All right, great. Good thing we're getting corrected here. I'm used to having audience participation, so this works well. All right, so in the middle, can't miss that one up. That's the creek fire. That's from the Southern Sierra. And then on the left-hand side, get this right yet? We have the Park Fire. That's from the Northern Sierra to the Siskiyous. All have about the same air quality index. Great. It's a pretty high number, something you would be worried about. But based on that number, we'd worry about all 3 fires the same. If we look underneath that and we start looking at the particle chemistry, what we end up seeing is that they're really different chemistries. So in the Park Fire, we have particles that are laden with chromium, a lot of chromium-6. For all of you that are old enough to remember the Aaron Brockovich movie, one thing you learn about lecturing is you have to be really careful about using movies because they quickly outdate you. But I'm going to do that anyways and say for the Aaron Brockovich movie, this is the same toxin that was getting into the groundwater, but this time it's getting into the air. much, much worse. All right, if you go to the creek fire, pretty much sooty material. Not good for you, but not laden with these toxic metals. You move over here to the Eaton fire, laden with lead. Now, I want to ask you this question. If you're thinking about the toxicity index of these, let's change that to quality index. They're all the same, right? Which one would you want to breathe? Well, I wouldn't want to breathe any of them, but if I had to, I'd go for the middle fire, right? The last thing I want to be doing is breathing a bunch of lead or hexavalent chromium. Could be mercury in there. But right now, we're missing that. There's another factor that we miss, too. So we've been examining fires over the last number of years, looking at detail at the particle chemistry. And one of the other things that jumps out of us is that we think of these fine particles, the PM2.5 that I mentioned. But when we start looking at these wildfires, what we find is that the PM2.5 is just the start. The major mass, the big bar here, is the largest proportion of the particles are less than 0.25 microns. They are really, really, really small. So if you look over here, I already said that the PM2.5 is about 1/20th of a human hair. And the particle mass that we're seeing, PM.1, is 25 times smaller than the PM2.5. Really, really, really small particles. Now, why do you care about that? Well, the reason you care is because it changes the impact on your health. So if you have PM10, coarser particles, upper respiratory system. You move to PM2.5, deep respiratory system. You move to PM1, you're going really, really deep into the deep lung tissue, and you get to the 0.1, and it moves right in directly into the tissue, right into your bloodstream. So you have fine lead particles, you're breathing them, PM.1, and they're moving right into your blood. So the consequences of that are pretty dire. So what we are proposing is that we really change how we start thinking about air. Instead of an air quality index, we shift to an air toxicity index. And the air toxicity index takes into account the particle concentration that we already do in the air quality index, but it adds these other dimensions. It takes in the particle composition, so the chemistry of the particles. It looks at the ultrafine levels, and it takes into account exposure period, because that matters a lot. And what we really need is it for it to be predictive. So I put a fictitious app here that we are driving towards to give you that kind of fidelity so you have the agency to know the real risk that's coming in. Now, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to keep going doomsday for a while, and then I'll bring it back to being a little more positive. So what I'm going to do next is talk about forecasting smoke toxicity and some of the work we've been doing on this. So we've been using a combination of physics-based and deep learning models that are in aggregate, that follow along the work of Childs and Marshall Burke, that allows us to track where particles have gone from any one fire and the probability of hitting any one location. And we can then go back and mine data that have been historically collected. So the EPA has networks of air monitoring that collects metal concentration. They can't do it in real time, but they can do it a few weeks after the fire. So they collect during the fire, they measure afterwards. That data becomes public. We take our models and we hindcast. We go back, looked at 7,000 different fires, tracked where those particles went, and then looked at the chemistry of the particles where they were hitting. That allows us to start getting into ability to then flip that model and forecast what's going to happen. But let me give you a couple observations first of things that we learned from doing that modeling. And that is, it matters a lot where the fire is burning. So what's the geology of that fire? So I already showed you this earlier when I was showing that we had one fire that had really high chromium concentrations and another one that didn't. It just had a carbonaceous material. And the reason is that when fires are burning across rocks, which really means the soil and the plants that have high metals in them, so those would be things like you might find here in the coastal range, basalts that are mafic, other rocks that are ultramafic, they're high in metals, things like chromium, nickel, and so on. And that turns out to get into the smoke. When we have rocks like you see in the Southern Sierra, the granitic rocks, those are low metal content rocks, we see a much lower concentration within the wildfires. And so what it gives us already then is the ability to say where the fire burns matters, and it matters a lot. So some fires are going to be really toxic, totally wildfires, so it doesn't have to have any urban interface here, just the wildland fires, can be really toxic and other ones not so much. We presently don't have a way to do that, but we are engineering a way so that you can all know what that difference is. When we add in the urban environment, we can add those as basically a type of geology that can also then go into our forecasting models. Let me give you one other bad news story, and then I'm going to turn it into a positive, right? So you have to know the bad news before you can take action. Okay, so let's go back to thinking about forecasting, but let's do forecast over long distances. So I started off earlier by saying that everywhere in the US has been woken up to wildfire smoke. So you're in the Midwest this last summer, you learned about wildfire smoke. You were in the Eastern Seaboard the year before, you learned about wildfire smoke. And now you realize what California had been experiencing, or most of the Western US for many decades. All right, so if we start looking at how that smoke transports over thousands of kilometers, what we end up finding is that it starts off with the metals in the smoke, just like you would expect. Smoke particles come up, metal particles are part of that. They actually get partially swept up by the surface soil that is also being burned. Goes into the fire. Then that starts transporting, and as it starts transporting, we see a really unfortunate outcome. The farther it goes, we start seeing a divergence between the metal particles and the main smoke plume. And when you get thousands of kilometers away from the fire, the metal particles, the toxins that we think are most acute, are arriving many hours to tens of hours before the main smoke plume. So we go back and think of the scenario that I painted earlier. We have a Canadian wildfire. We're transporting, get the right word out, transporting those particles thousands of kilometers down to Chicago, Detroit, turning and going along to Cleveland. The year before, going to New York and in DC. If you were really risk adverse and you were looking at the NOAA website that tracks the smoke plume coming, and you said, okay, I'm going to go out and do all my shopping today because tomorrow that smoke plume is going to arrive and I don't want to get exposed to that. Well, guess what? You're already getting exposed to those toxins and you didn't know it. That's my bad news. Okay, so now let me flip and tell you some good news. That we're recognizing these threats. The air toxicity index that we're starting to really push would resolve that. It would tell you the toxicity there, not just the particle concentrations. That is really key. And so the other thing that we're doing is we need to derive new data streams, new ways of getting data. So we have developed low-cost, really lightweight sensors that can also collect sample and gives us the ability to adopt a different sampling platform. So we can go and do drones to capture air quality. We can also equip first responders. We can give them the same technology that we have for our drones so they get real-time information, but we also can do something else with our sensors, is that we can give them real-time information on the fire itself. So relative humidity, wind speed, all the things that they need to understand the probability of ignition at any one point. So it arms them with information for the fire itself, arms them for information on the toxicity, and it gives us the ability to then get information back in real time on what the fire is doing, the emission factor of the metals, and that allows us to give you all that information, and it gives us predictive models for that. So as we go into the future, it's really a more hopeful period that we can give you agency on how to fight the toxins that are in there. And so we're really moving towards this air toxicity index. We're trying to get that out to all of you. We're trying to get data to you, try to get to the first responders. And that's the hopeful future for us all. Thank you so much.